So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Clown World, because in today's news, we really do live in a clown world. But before I get onto the main video of today, can I yet again remind you, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. It really does help. So let's get on to the news of today. And the first news story is that the very famous Salah al-Jafwari, this is an individual who was in Gaza, who had been promoting various forms of, let's call it activism. This is an individual who supposedly had gone from being a freedom fighter to a blood donor, to a fostered father, to a revived corpse, to a war correspondent. Anyway, the guy was a brilliant propagandist. Now, in terms of all the propaganda that he went through, it turned out that he had actually managed to amass over $10 million in forms of foreign aid donations. And would you know, now that Hamas has come up after the ceasefire, he's been executed because apparently Hamas wants their hands on the money. So yeah, there's that. Now, in terms of the actual peace deal, it's very interesting to note that the peace deal itself may not actually last. And this is after Hamas declared that they won't give up their arms or control Gaza, despite saying that this is exactly what was part of Trump's deal. Now, at this point in time, whether or not the actual ceasefire will hold, we don't know. But obviously the hostages have all been exchanged, and it would appear that in terms of all the hostages being exchanged, Hamas seems to be keeping their end of the bargain. Now, you will note that Trump went to Egypt to sign the agreement, and whilst there, you could see on screen all of the attendees who went to observe the historic peace summit. But you will notice that there was an individual missing. Yep, Cyril Ramaphosa was not invited. So Cyril, with all of his moral grandstanding, didn't get a seat at the table. Now, the UK leader, Keir Starmer, was thoroughly embarrassed by Donald Trump, who flat out just ignored him. In fact, you can actually watch the clip of that exchange right here.
United Kingdom, where's United Kingdom? Where's my friend? Where? Come here. Is everything going good?
Very good.
That's very nice of you here. These people all came in like 20-minute notice, and I think it's fantastic. And we have so many others, and just so many others.
Two-tier Keir clearly thought that he was going to give him the opportunity to speak, and Donald Trump was like, nice that you're here, now go back to where you were standing. Now, as I said in my video yesterday, just hours after the ink was still drying on the peace deal, and Hamas came out of positions of hiding, they started to execute those they considered to be collaborators and individuals who were less favorable to their ruling. Now, we've seen that before, especially if you're from South Africa. Now, in other really batshit bonkers crazy news in the UK, the current news in the UK is that apparently Christian preachers could now be jailed up to 2 years for preaching in the street, and they will go to prison for praying, handing out a Bible, or leaflets. In fact, you can actually see GB News talk about this right here.
GBN tonight with me, Martin Daubney. Now, the Labour-ran Rushmore Borough Council has sparked outrage by proposing a sweeping injunction that could see Christian street preachers in prison for up to 2 years if the injunction is breached, now over claims of causing offence or distress. Now, under the proposed terms, Christians will be banned from praying for individuals, handing out religious leaflets or Bibles by hand, and laying hands on people in prayer, even with...
Now, in other news, apparently this is perfectly acceptable in the UK.
Just gotta go there. We just go back up again.
Now, this has led many individuals to ask the question as to what the hell is going on in batshit bonkers Britain, and actually it's quite easy to understand. It's been conquered. It's now an Islamic state. And if you dispute that, well, you're an idiot. Now, it's important to understand that for the longest time, South Africa has been drumming the genocide narrative in Gaza. Now, Camille Harris actually did an interview on MSNBC on the 12th of October, and during it, she was asked about the genocide question. And she responded that in terms of the law, that a court will decide whether or not there had been genocide. Now, she lamented the number of children killed amidst the refusal to give aid, yet implicitly distanced herself from outright genocide claims. Now, this prompted some media outlets to fact-check the claim whether or not genocide had actually occurred. Now, we're reminded that the conflict has occurred for 2 years, and according to the IDF, the number of Hamas fighters were 58,000 individuals who had been killed. Now, Hamas has now confirmed what the actual civilian death toll was, and it's 67,000. So that's actually quite amazing, because for the longest time we heard 2 million, then 3 million, then 400,000, that the numbers were all over the show. But according to the latest statistics by Hamas itself, only 67,000 died, of which 58,000 were fighters, which implies an 85% combatant rate. Now, according to the historian John Spencer, this is historic. It's never been done before. So even with Hamas doing forms of urban warfare and using civilians as shield, this ratio has just never been achieved in history before. Now, we all heard the allegations of hospital bombings, famines, and ethnic cleansing, although none of this ever materialized. And so what we are now seeing, now that the war is over, is well-fed Palestinians celebrating amid largely functional cityscapes, which has contradicted the mass starvation claims. But the idea behind the genocide of the Palestinian people is ultimately to dilute Jewish historical victimhood by equating Gaza to the Holocaust. And that's exactly what the ANC government has been attempting to do. And the whole idea behind it was to enable anti-Israeli activists to draw false moral comparisons between Israel's defense and Nazi exterminism. And this has led many individuals to ask the question as to why Egypt and Saudi Arabia both publicly decried genocide whilst quietly partnering with Israel in US-brokered security mechanisms. Jordan itself joined famine alarmist statements, even though it cooperated with Israel behind closed doors. So if Israel really did commit genocide, then it's remarkably bad at genocide. Of a population of over 2 million, to have only killed 67,000 Gazans, of which 58,000 were Hamas fighters, in over 2 years of conflict, well, Israel must really suck at genocide. But the exclusion of Ramaphosa from the actual peace agreement has not gone unnoticed. Now, the reason that you may say that South Africa was excluded is because it took an adversarial role with Israel during the whole conflict, but Spain, Qatar, and Turkey were all invited, even though they took adversarial roles with Israel. So what we're actually seeing here is we're seeing that South Africa was just excluded by Donald Trump, full stop, because South Africa's moral superpower status now rings hollow, with everybody thinking that, to be frank, South Africa's a joke. Now, Durko's response fixated on Israeli abuses. It ignored the 251 hostages and the 1,200 murdered Israelis, and largely it even ignored the plight of its own citizens who had been held hostage by Hamas, something that the Israeli embassy itself noted with glee. Now, South Africa's G20 presidency now closes with, to be frank, very little achievement. You would hardly know that we actually had the G20 here. And ultimately what this has led to is claims that South Africa loves to posture over any form of actual mediation, and that South Africa's form of moral blindness and inconsistency has now made it a non-player in forms of global diplomacy. In fact, you can also contrast that with the police minister's warning that South Africa risks becoming the next Colombia or Ecuador. Hardly a super moral power material country now, is it? So what we can now safely say is that rather than boost South Africa's moral position globally, the actual conflict is now blowing up in South Africa's face, with South Africa looking like basically just another jobber trying to score political points against a foreign adversary for no other reasons than ideological posturing. But you see, the ANC's ideological posturing is currently on full display. You know where else we can see it? We can actually see it in the comments that Cyril Ramaphosa made in September 2025 when he praised DA-run metros, which included Cape Town and Stellenbosch, for their clean audits. Now, as you'll know, if you watched my videos at the time, there was significant backlash from the ANC, which forced a narrative reversal. Many individuals attacked Cyril for that, and there were even threats that Cyril might be fired for merely saying that the DA ran clean audits, which is, well, to be factual. Now, at the recent NCOP, Cyril Ramaphosa attacked Cape Town's per capita spending disparity, claiming that affluent areas got priority over black townships. Apparently, he cited Stats SA and Census 2011 to 2022 data that Cape Town expanded service access slower than any other metro, despite growing its population faster than every other metro combined. Now, according to Cyril, he said he's seen numerous horror scenes. He says the attention given to where black people live is less than desirable. He compares Soweto's upgrade under Johannesburg to Cape Town's neglect. So now Cape Town's gone from being this perfect example that you should follow to he's never seen something so horrible as Cape Town. Although one then questions why he lives in Cape Town and he has a mansion there. I mean, surely he should move to Joburg? In any case, he demands corrective measures to fix apartheid-era patterns in city investments, claiming that what's actually happening in Cape Town is that all the money is being spent on the whites and the black people are just being excluded. So he's now rebranding ANC municipalities as models of excellence to blunt the damage from his earlier DA praise. Now, this has led to Jordan Hill-Lewis, the Cape Town mayor, saying that these comments are nothing more than damage control, and he asserts that DA metros are islands of progress amid ANC ruin. He notes that Cape Town remains the only metro with clean audits as of 2023 and 2024, which is 100% true. And in the Eastern Cape, the only municipality to get a clean audit was, well, Kotha, and that happened to be DA-run. So one has to now ask the fundamental question: why has Cyril gone back on his previous praise of the DA municipalities? He's gone from praising them to attacking them in the same breath. Well, the reason is actually very easy to understand, and that is because the ANC is having electoral anxiety ahead of its 2029 local polls, especially after key ANC losses in Soweto and Johannesburg. Now, you see, the problem is the ANC has very little to campaign with. It could say, look what we did in Gaza, except it did nothing. It wasn't even invited to the deal signing. And they can't really say that they've fixed or improved any of the metros around the country, because they haven't. They can't really say that they've done anything, because what they've effectively done is looted the state dry. Which is why in the next news article, Busi Siwe, the business leader South Africa CEO, said at the Agri-SA Atlas Congress that the ANC are a bunch of thieves masquerading as government officials who must be stopped with reforms. Now, according to her, if you looked at 2007, the pre-Zuma era, unemployment was 23% and growth was at 6%. And now, since Zuma, which includes Cyril Ramaphosa, who was the deputy president under Zuma, and has been president for how long now? Well, according to the 2025 data, unemployment is now 36% and growth is only 1%. And so according to her, we can see that we have the wrong political leadership, which has collapsed the economy. Well, to be frank, completely factual. Now, she said that we need to de-risk the economy from politics so that bad leadership can't ever cripple it again. And so her reforms are Eskom should have private sector generation expanded, Transnet should be privatized because port queues exceed 2 kilometers long with drivers facing diesel theft at night. Private operators should be allowed to run the rail net, and the Scorpion should be re-established in order to combat corruption uncovered by all of the millions of commissions that South Africa tends to have. Now, in reality, there are 743 state-owned enterprises. I really had no idea it was this many, and all of them are dysfunctional. Foreign investment could be brought in, in order to invest in energy, logistics, law and order, all of those would theoretically prompt capital flows to return into South Africa, according to the CEO of the BLSA. So let me know what you think in the comments section below. Should South Africa reform itself so that we could never have any of our functions irreversibly repaired by politics ever again? And this is a very important topic, specifically given everything that is now going on with the NHI, the government's next gravy train to loot dry. Now, it should come as no surprise that the South African government is now looking at all the corruption occurring and going, how the hell are we actually going to fix this? Well, Treasury has a plan. Treasury's 5-year strategy from 2025 to 2030 is to build a fully digital e-procurement system, also classed as EGP, deploy AI and advanced analytics to detect tender irregularities. Now, the goal is to automate the procurement value chain, boost efficiency and accountability. The idea is that if you reduce the administrative burden, centralize data for oversized bodies, what you could effectively do is have this automation that would automatically find all forms of corruption. Now, the idea is that this type of system has been used before in Rwanda, Ukraine, and South Korea, all of which have shown the system to catch corruption has all been successful. But you see, the problem is the anticipated benefits of this is that you'll have some form of transparency and traceability of spending. You'll have real-time monitoring of tenders to curb fraud. You'll have stronger law enforcement interfaces via the centralized data. But you see, here's the problem. We had one of these already, and it was in the medical industry. You will recall that there was an entire commission because the medical aid industry used automation in order to find forms of corruption that was occurring in terms of reimbursements put into medical aid schemes for procedures that had occurred. But largely, the individuals who had been found to have committed the most fraud were deemed to be politically vulnerable and of a previously disadvantaged variety, which led many in the government to say that the system, specifically in terms of its programming, the ghost in the shell, if you want to call it that, was inherently racist because it was individuals who had been previously disadvantaged who had, according to the automated system, been committing the most fraud. Now, the only way that they suggested that this could have happened was, well, racism and forms of unconscious biasness. So I cannot see how the Treasury's AI plan is going to be any different, with the e-procurement system probably in the future also having to go through a commission to identify why it was picking up, previously disadvantaged individuals as being individuals committing the fraud, even though they would be the ones who would be using the system. Ergo, mathematically, they're the ones that would be picked up by the system's automation the most. But you can see the ANC will not want this form of accountability. They never, ever do. So that's the news of the day, ladies and gentlemen. Do let me know what you think of South Africa's exclusion from the entire global peace deal. And do let me know what you think of the ANC's plan to use AI in order to capture its own corruption. I really can't see them doing this. But in any case, these are just my opinions. Do let me know what you think in the comment section below. Until next time, bye.